Hello and welcome to this presentation on eating for health and longevity, getting started, doing it right, and staying motivated. And the first thing you should ask when someone gives a talk like this is, what are their qualifications? Why are they giving this talk? And I'm giving it because I'm passionate about this. I'm a professor of ENT, ear, nose, and throat, otolaryngology at SUNY Downstate Health Sciences University. That's in Brooklyn, New York. Been there for almost 30 years and recently became a diplomat of the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine. I also founded and chair a committee on plant-based health and nutrition at my home institution, where we've been very active, and also work with students in the College of Medicine at the university to advise them in a lifestyle medicine interest group, as well as a nutritional initiative. I've been in practice a long time as a pediatric ear, nose, and throat doc, recognized by Castle Connolly as one of America's best doctors for more than 20 years. But that's not why I'm giving this talk. And, I think the main reason to put credibility in a talk like this is to walk the talk. And I'd like to use myself as an example to start out with. So here I am at age of 2 or 3 years, waddling along, showing off my mid portion and my muscles, clearly destined for greatness as a bodybuilder. But here's what happened. At age 56, put on some weight, and my behaviors were not great. I wasn't eating that well. Activity was limited. Sleep was moderate. I've always been a non-smoker, but really was not doing much to get the exercise I need and reduce stress. And that was reflected in some of my measurements. My weight had shot up to about 160 from being about 140 in college and 130 in high school. Blood pressure was moderate. Blood lipids were not great. And most importantly, I didn't have much endurance, couldn't really exercise much or go far. I doze off during boring lectures or sometimes even during interesting lectures. And when I got colds several times a year, they were bad. They'd last for weeks. Most importantly, I have 3 children who are now grown. And I said, am I conducting my life in a way that I will be around to spend time with my grandchildren? And the answer was clearly no. So some changes were made, and this was the result. At age 62, where now I'm eating a healthy diet, a so-called whole food plant-based diet. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. I'm very active, running quite a lot. Picked this up at age 56 for the first time. Did 3 marathons and 2 half marathons in the past 18 months. And have become more careful about stress reduction, mindfulness, doing things that blow off steam. And the result was a nice weight loss, overall improvement very nicely in my cardiovascular blood markers. Most importantly, I've run a few marathons in under 4 hours and even a half marathon in 1 hour and 40 minutes, which isn't bad for someone age 62. Perhaps best of all is the energy is great. Rare dozing off, micro sleep, really rarely get sick. And when I do, I recover quickly. So a real, I would say, personal success story. And it's that personal success that I want to share with you. And it begins by considering food not just as something we put in our mouths because it tastes good or we want a little satisfaction, but as medicine itself. Quite frankly, our food is killing us. This is no secret. The American diet is awful, and it's become the leading cause of mortality in the United States, more than smoking, more than other bad habits. It really is a problem. And the solution is to have a paradigm shift and not just view food as large portions of tasty stuff we put in our mouth, but as something that helps us survive, thrive, live long, and be healthy. So at my institution, SUNY Downstate in Brooklyn, About 4 years ago, I started a committee on plant-based health and nutrition. And one of the first things we did was to engage the medical staff leadership to develop a position statement on plant-based health and nutrition, shown here, that it emphasizes consuming vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, and fruits. Legumes, of course, are the beans, such as chickpeas, black beans, red beans, soy products, and also lentils. So that this type of diet can not only prevent and treat chronic diseases, but even reverse them in adults, and that's based on evidence. The diseases for which the most evidence exists include obesity, high body mass index, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, coronary artery disease, heart disease, and high lipids in the blood. Very important conditions, especially considering that 70% of Americans are overweight, more than 40% are obese. Diabetes is increasing rapidly. Coronary artery disease is the #1 killer in the US, of about 650,000 deaths per year. Hypertension, high lipids, also massive problems. So if you're interested in the rationale and the evidence base, the research supporting this type of a statement, you can go to our website, downstate.edu/plant-based. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see some resources. You can click on a research evidence summary, and that will show you in great detail an up-to-date summary of all the current research that we've found, summarized in clear, plain English. And in that summary, you'll find an executive summary, systematic reviews, randomized trials, a lot of population-based cohort studies from around the world, going back 50, 60 years, that encompass more than 1 million people who have been observed, sometimes for 30, 40 years or longer. Intervention studies. So go seek out the evidence if you're so inclined. You can also visit this site, plantbasedresearch.org, a project related to the Plantition Project. It enables you to look by disease, by any topic, and see the evidence for plant-based or plant-forward nutrition supporting it. So hopefully I've piqued your interest that this is something to pursue. So how do you start? You decided you want to make a change. What do you do? Well, of course, willpower is great. Who doesn't have willpower or want willpower? But I think you also need skill power in addition to willpower. So it's not enough to just want to do something. You need the knowledge. You need the emotional, the medical, the mental, the physical skills to be able to do it. I may want to do 100 push-ups, and quite frankly, I could come pretty close these days, but simply willing myself to do it is not going to accomplish it. As I said, I've run 3 marathons in the past year and a half. When I started running for the first time 6 years ago, if I wanted to run a marathon based on willpower, it would have never happened. I would have hurt myself or simply failed miserably. You need knowledge, you need education, you need the skills, the inside abilities to do this. And I'm going to share some of that with you now. You can go to our website, downstate.edu/plant-based. And on the left-hand side, you can click on a tab for a Getting Started guide. This is how to eat for health and longevity. And it's a very practical guide loaded with pictures and clear advice on how to get enough protein from eating plants, how to do it in a healthful and economical way, an efficient way, how to avoid oil in your foods, cooking without oil, cooking without added sugars, avoiding processed and ultra-processed food. It's all there, how to do it. So please look at this guide. I think you'll find it quite useful. There's another resource, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. You can access their information at lifestylemedicine.org. Shown here is a typical plate of a mix of some of the things you should be eating: fruits and vegetables, good plant proteins, and whole healthy grains. They have a wonderful guide also on getting started on a whole food plant-based diet. You can find at their website, and I'd encourage you to explore their materials. But we need to step back and say, what is this plant-based nutrition? What does it really mean to think about food in a healthy way as medicine? And when I refer to this whole food plant-based diet, I'm really referring to foods that occur naturally, and they're either unrefined or minimally refined. In other words, they have all their nutrients and things still there. They're also generally minimally processed. So they may be chopped or grated or cut up, but they're not going to be highly, highly processed. Uh, this is a diet. It's a type of a vegetarian diet that emphasizes all the good stuff: plant foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, beans, nuts, and seeds. And it discourages eating the bad carbs, the bad carbohydrates, so white rice, white bread, pastries. Instead, you have brown rice, whole wheat bread, whole wheat pastas, pulsed pastas, quinoa, bulgur, farro, all sorts of healthy, healthy grains that can be substituted for the processed stuff, and avoiding the sugars and refined foods, which is oils, even olive oil, not good for you, just full of calories. Fruit juice, very concentrated and processed, and obviously the convenience foods, the processed, ultra processed foods, those Beyond Burgers, Impossible Burgers, which are really no healthier than simply eating a hamburger. What they do is they're better for the environment, less greenhouse gases in their production, and they avoid cruelty to animals. But as far as health, saturated fats, salt, cholesterol, calories, it's all the same. So you discourage that, and you're going to really minimize or completely avoid, if possible, the animal products such as the meat and eggs and dairy. So that's a whole food plant-based diet. Another way to view this is in a pyramid form, where at the base is what most people do. They eat what they want when they want. That's an omnivorous diet, no restrictions. A step up would be what's become very popular. It's called a flexitarian diet, where you're inclined to be vegetarian. So you're thinking about it, you're moving in that direction, but you still eat meat, typically chicken, fish, maybe not as much red meat. And then a progression to a semi-vegetarian diet, something I did for a good part of my life, where I'm eating mostly plant foods, but I do have some meat. Deli meat was something I enjoyed, and fish and chicken. Next step is moving to vegetarian, where you get rid of the meat. But some people who are vegetarian, they're happy to include dairy products, cheese, and eggs, or both. Some vegetarians are pescatarians. They'll include some fish as well. Then we move to the vegan, which is where you're purely vegetarian. You're only eating plant products. You're completely avoiding all animal foods, including something like honey that's produced by bees. The pinnacle of this would be the whole food plant-based diet, and that's a healthy vegan diet. So a vegan diet can be junk food. You could eat sweets and soda and Oreo cookies and licorice for every meal and be a vegan and be eating horribly unhealthy food. A whole food plant-based diet is basically a healthy vegan diet. We can view it this way, moving towards more plant foods and less animal foods. So you see, it is a spectrum. Looking at the United States, the last Gallup polls showed that only about 5% of Americans were vegetarians and only 2% were vegans. Probably less than 1% are whole food plant-based vegans. So it has not yet become popular, but I think we're at a tipping point where people are really moving in this direction for a number of reasons. The leading one being to avoid cruelty to animals, reduce greenhouse gas production that is rampant with animal husbandry and farming, and thirdly, to improve health, which to me is the main reason. Let's look at some plant-forward or plant-predominant diets, which tend to be high in carbohydrates. And they're shown here. The DASH diet is specifically for hypertension. It's been well studied. There's the Mediterranean diet, very popular, emphasizes more fats, particularly olive oil, and it's done better than comparative standard American diets. It's not the olive oil that's making you healthy. It's the lack of all the junk in the standard American diet. So even better is to get rid of the olive oil. Vegan, as mentioned, is animal products, but you can have a lot of junk food in a vegan diet. The best alternative is the low-fat, whole food plant-based diet. Whole plant-based foods, vegan, minimally processed, tends to be very high in carbohydrate, and that's fine. That is absolutely fine. And this is the type of diet that you would eat to not just live long, but be healthy and potentially reverse things like diabetes, heart disease, other chronic diseases you may already have. So that carbohydrate bears mention. A lot of people, they get very concerned about carbs and carbohydrates, but that's really unfounded. What you should be concerned about are the bad carbohydrates. Looking at data from over 200 studies, we see that consuming lots of fiber in good carbohydrates, as well as whole grains, really reduces substantively your chance of dying from any cause or from heart disease, stroke, diabetes. The people who eat fiber and whole grains tend to have lower weight, better blood pressure, better cholesterol. It really is healthy, especially at 25 to 29 grams of fiber today. More is even better. So it's the quality of the carbs that matters. Eating good carbs is very healthy. Similarly, people will say, well, if I eat only plant foods, how am I going to get enough protein? Well, if you're concerned about that, there's a movie you can see on Netflix called Game Changers, which shows you how ultra athletes and Olympians do just fine eating plant sources of protein, many of which are shown here. And certainly lentils and soy products like edamame, tofu, tempeh, all the beans, even the lonely potato has a fair amount of protein, as does spinach. Not only does it have protein plant foods, but it's wrapped in a lot of fiber, other nutrients, and not a drop of cholesterol. When you eat animal proteins, you're getting cholesterol, saturated fat, and most importantly, zero fiber. That good fiber that helps you live longer and have less health problems. So plant proteins are terrific and can readily substitute for meat proteins. It's a complete myth that you have to have all amino acids with every serving, such as mixing rice and beans. As long as you eat a diverse diet, you'll be fine. So the alternatives to the plant-based tend to be these low carbohydrate, high protein, high fat diets shown here. The paleo diet is eating foods before hunting and in the time of hunting and gathering, before farming was really prevalent. So you're drinking bone broth, but you're not eating a lot of grains because they were not present. South Beach is a form of a higher fat diet, but it balances it with healthy whole grains. Atkins is very similar, limiting the bad carbohydrates, but allowing animal products, fish, and other protein sources. Keto probably has been the most popular, very high fat and lots of protein, almost no carbohydrates, really pushes the animal products and dairy products. These diets are exactly that. They're diets. They're good for short-term weight loss. They are not good for long-term health. They are actually quite problematic for long-term health. So let's take the keto diet, for example, which is nothing new. The keto diet has been around for decades. It was initially used as a treatment for epilepsy in children. It turns out that refractory epilepsy in children really benefits from a ketogenic diet, a diet high in fats, high in protein, low in carbohydrates. Now, when we look at these studies, as was done in this systematic review from the Cochrane Group, pretty much everybody in all the studies had adverse events from sticking to this keto diet. They tended to be often vomiting, constipation, diarrhea, lethargy, weight loss, nausea. All right, not necessarily dangerous, but also decreases in your bone density, more gallstones, fatty liver, high cholesterol, hypoglycemia, and this was just in the relative short term. There's little data on what happens when you continue this over the long term, but and it's a big but. We know that when you take lots of fat into your body, saturated fat, the way it's processed in your gut with your microbiome is that it is converted into free fatty acids that circulate in the body, in the blood, and they end up being deposited where they shouldn't because your body cannot handle it. So your liver gets fatty deposits, your muscle gets fatty deposits, and your pancreas. This has profound effects on how your body responds to sugar, and your insulin becomes resistant. It just doesn't work. So the pancreas works overtime, and sooner or later you get diabetes. There's problems with these free fatty acids accumulating in arteries and vessels, leading to hardening of the arteries and heart disease. It's a whole cascade of bad effects from eating a lot of fat and free fatty acids. So let's say I've convinced you to stick with the whole food plant-based approach, or at least move in that direction. How do you get started? By setting goals. The system used in lifestyle medicine is adapted from business. It's called SMART. So making goals specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So for example, if I wanted to incorporate more cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, into my diet, I might commit a prescription of a cup of broccoli, steamed or roasted, twice a week for the next 6 weeks. And I might add other goals to that. And goals are great, but a goal can be a process or an outcome. An outcome goal would be, gee, I want to lose 30 pounds and I want to run 3 marathons. That's great, but it sets you up to fail. It's really the process that counts. A process goal sets out a plan, things you're going to do. So you're going to transition to this whole food plant-based diet. You're going to have more broccoli. You're going to add in other plant-based foods to substitute for animal proteins, maybe twice a week, 3 times a week, meatless Mondays, fearless Fridays, however you choose to do it, but you're committing to the process. If you commit to the process, the outcome will follow if you stick to the process. If you just simply focus on an outcome, any kink along the way can lead to failure, and often those things are beyond your control. So commit to the process and the outcome will happen. And the process is moving from what America eats, or most of the world eats, the so-called standard American diet loaded with junk, to a whole food plant-based diet. So you're getting rid of those sweets, the snacks, the ultra-processed, fried, fast foods, sugar-sweetened beverages, and you're moving to those whole plant foods with the vegetables, the grains, the beans, the legumes, the nuts, the seeds, etc. But don't feel bad if it's hard to give these things up, because actually the food industry specifically creates junk food to be addictive. And the formula is shown here: lots of salt and fat, make it crunchy, it feels good in your mouth, and you are addicted. You want to be even more addicted? Add sugar. Add sugar. And that really carries it over. Okay. One of my favorite Italian restaurants I go to, it'll be nameless, they have great sauce. But when you look at what's in the sauce, because they sell it commercially, it's loaded with sugar, with fat, and with salt. Not great. Almost any soup that you have in a can is loaded with salt. So are canned tomatoes. And that's why they taste good and they're addictive. If you want to eat junk food, that's great. Just cook it and make it yourself and make it healthy. So the bottom lines, when all is said and done, if you want to live to be 100 and have a good quality of life, then you have to act like centenarians. Look at The Blue Zones, a terrific book on what people do in the pockets around the world where we find a lot of centenarians, people living to 100. Most importantly, they favor plant foods. They do eat some meat, but it's rare. They move around, they have a sense of purpose, and they affiliate with other like-minded folks. Strongly encourage you to look at The Blue Zones, fabulous book. Easy way to get started is to make a plate with a grain, a green, and a bean. A grain, a green, and a bean, the so-called Buddha bowl. Very easy to put together, and that is a healthy, low-cost, plant-based meal. A grain, a green, and a bean. Last, in the words of Virgil, I think the greatest wealth we can all have is our health. And moving in this healthy, whole food, plant-based direction, I think will get you there. It's a wonderful journey. I've enjoyed it on my own, and I hope this presentation inspires you to get started, do it right, and stay motivated. Feel free to look at it again and absorb more information, or go to our website, downstate.edu/plant-based, for further resources. Thank you for listening.